With friends like Linda Tripp, who needs enemies? Hello, everyone. Terrence here with Hollywood Already Did It. If you haven't already, go ahead, like, share, subscribe to the channel, ring that bell below. Anytime we have something, you will be among the first to know. Episode 4 of Impeachment, called The Telephone Hour, deals mostly with what is known as the Monica Lewinsky tapes, the recording of all of that, and we get to see sort of, obviously dramatized, but see firsthand how all of this sort of came to be. So Linda seems to be taking the not to be trusted line from the last episode pretty much to heart, and is also starting to get threats. There's a letter on her desk that just says these are all the people who have somehow mysteriously ended up deceased after saying something ill towards the president. There's a list. It's like you don't want to be on this list. So obviously, the breadcrumbs are starting to lead to a place where she is starting to get threatened. But Monica confronts her about the article too, and like, what are you doing? Like, you're messing things up for me. And her whole concern is still getting back in that White House. Come hell or high water, no matter what torture or pain it puts on her mentally to be around President Clinton, she wants to be back in that White House. Very much as a small, young child. And we'll get into that a little bit later, but a young child who just doesn't know more worth for herself, that she just kind of just keeps putting herself in this vicious cycle of pain and mental anguish. But basically, this episode deals with Linda trying to figure out what to do next. What's the next step after this? After being her name sort of being besmirched, so she reaches out to Lucianne Goldberg, played by Miss Martingale, and asks questions like, "What can we do next? Can we write a book?" And Martingale's like, "You don't have enough. You don't have enough proof." And she sort of plants the seed in her head. Maybe you should tape her. And originally, and at first, Linda has some reservations. Like, is that even legal? Like, what can we do? And she's like, no, it's possible. It's 100% legal, which it's not. Some states it is, but it's not. And we start seeing this weird thing happen with Linda, and it happens throughout the entire episode, where she is partly gung ho about clearing her name, and also at the same time, like, somewhat seeming to care for Monica and not wanting to hurt her. And so her whole brain gets twisted and saying, hey, and even Lucianne brings it up. But her whole thing is like, hey, I'm trying to free Monica from this vicious cycle grip that this man has her on and has so many others on. Lucianne tells her that once you put her name out there, she is going to be viscerally destroyed and she will not be okay. And in a just warped sense of mind, Linda's like, nah, she'll be fine. She's from Beverly Hills. She'll land on her feet perfectly fine. Yeah, that we all see how that turned out. And so she is using Monica in a self-aggrandizing way to sort of clear her name, not realizing the torture that she's putting her through. And what's crazy is that there's this whole sequence of a lot of telephone calls. We spend a lot of the episode dealing with telephone calls, and I'm sure if we actually can find the actual tapes, there are segments of those that are recorded, because get into the specifics of like, I made you a mixtape for your workout, and these are the songs you like. Those are too specific of a thing that we cannot hear, that they would not put in the script. But we get through all that, and they end up having a sleepover, and we learn that Monica has sort of had this vicious cycle with guys. She doesn't quite know her worth, and so she went from one relationship with a married guy who had a kid while they were together to this, and those are her two main relationships. We also get to see that at this sleepover, this is where she's holding on to that infamous blue dress that has the semen from the president on it. And you can see the wheels start turning in a second, because she's kind of like, oh, why would you keep that? But also at the same time, like, that is another check mark in my cap of things that I can sort of hold on to. It is interesting to see the back and forth that happens that Sarah Paulson is giving Linda Tripp to sort of show the anguish that she has of knowing that she's going to crush this girl, but she's doing it for what she thinks are the correct reasons, to free her and to free and to sort of get back at the president. it's clear that she knows, and she even says it, like, I know I'm going to lose the friendship on this, but it's going to be worth it in the end. And so there's just a moment in the scene after sleepover where Monica's asleep on the couch and she just comes to stare at her. She's just reflecting on what she's about to do and what path she has gone down. And it's great to see. Beanies, Monica has a lot of emotional moments in this episode. It's probably the most emotional ranges that we see from Monica so far. As she's basically starting to have a mental breakdown. She is being what we refer to now as gaslit. There are a lot of moments where the president is promising her one thing but not giving her another, and sort of trying to keep her away or at bay, but contain her enough, keep her on a string enough that she doesn't feel obliged to go say anything. As long as you keep her on the string of like the cycle where there's a chance you can come back, but I'm not completely cutting you off, there will never be a moment where she's like, well, F this, I'm going to go scream from the rooftops. He's trying to placate her enough so that she stays at her place. And so, and she's starting to kind of realize, like, she's never going to get back in that White House. There's a scene at the beginning, she meets with one of the staff members, and they're like, yeah, this job's been filled, after time and time again telling her that she will be there, just hanging her on that string. To the point, there's a time where she goes back to the White House and has a moment where the president left her a gift and Betty gives it to her, and it's some just tacky stuff, like a scarf or whatnot. And Betty's like, oh, he's from Arkansas, what do you expect? But she calls Betty after getting a call from Linda, who sort of sets the seed that Lucienne sort of said that, like, you're never going to get this job. You're basically a black mark. If he were to give you a job, because Lucienne and Linda go to a reporter, if he were to give you a job, it would wind up in this weird quid pro quo type of thing. Like, we're giving you this job for sexual favors. So they can never actually give her this job at the White House. She's not aware of that, but Linda uses it to her advantage and says, hey, you have a black mark. They're never going to give you this. And Monica calls Betty at her home in the middle of the night and just lays into her and crying hysterically. And it's a great scene. Clearly going through some type of quasi-panic attack, but also just a mental breakdown. And Betty immediately calls the president. And the president is... it's this weird thing that he protects Betty by saying, hey, you don't get to call someone who's gone through Jim Crow in the South and at her home with whatever it is. I thought you were a good girl. He was referring to her as a good girl, which just gives me chills right now. It just sounds gross. So I thought you were one of the good girls. I thought you were a good girl. He keeps repeating that to sort of calm her down, but put her in her place. Like, you are a child, and you're supposed to be good. Whenever we have these interactions, you're supposed to be one way with me. Don't go that other way. And he basically placates her enough to say that, like, and she's like, I'm going to move to New York. And he's like, well, that might be good for you. And his brain is thinking, cool, I can get this problem out of my way. There's no way that he actually thinks New York is going to be good. And he sort of placates on the back end of it, saying, hey, once this is all over, I'm going to probably move to New York. And we can probably see each other again. She's like, we're not going to see each other again. But he says, I can make some calls and I can probably get you a job at somewhere out in New York. And so he calls his friend Vernon Jones, who's played by Blair Underwood. And for a brief moment of the sequence, he feels like he's one of the good folks in there. But you have to know that if he the line that sort of gives it away is that I see myself in him. I see myself in President Clinton. So there's this wall that everybody sort of has in Washington where it's sort of very self-aggrandizing, pat myself on the back. Look at all the cool people I've met. And it's fascinating. And she sees it, and she sees a photo of him and Bill, and that's when he tells him that, like, I met him such and such years ago when he was 30, and I knew he was going to be president, and I see so much of myself in him. And he's like, look, he made some calls, and I feel like if he's calling me for you, you're someone special. I'm going to give you a spot at Revlon. She's through the moon. She's like, oh, this could possibly happen. He walks her out to the elevator, and she says to him, next time you see him, give him a hug for me. He's like, I'm not hugging another man. And as she gets on the elevator, he pats her on the butt, which is disgusting. But it lets you know that whatever conversation was had between President Clinton and Vernon, they're best buddies, and they probably have had some bad stories about yeah, she was my lay, or I slept with her, or whatnot. He's like, I need you to give her the thought of having a job because she's one of my my side pieces. And so Vernon never actually sees her in the manner of I'm going to get you a job. He sees her as more of a piece of candy that he's just toying around with for his old buddy. And that sucks because she doesn't know any better. She thinks she's actually got a shot. So she goes on this diatribe with Linda back and forth, back and forth. Like, oh, Redbon's going to call, and never does. And Redbon's not going to call. And we just see this slow descent into just seeing that she's been sort of led astray. And we, through all of this, she finally gets the nerve to go up to the DOD and say, "This is my last day. I'm gonna leave." Of course, I don't. Timing wise, I'm not sure what happens next because we don't really get to the next episode. But it doesn't look like obviously she doesn't make it out of there in time before her name just gets completely destroyed because her name is now in the Paula Jones circle of it all. Lucy Ann and Linda sort of come up with this idea that like I can't take this to the story because I don't want Monica to know, and I don't want it to go the way she's still trying to play this back and forth where I want to tell the story, but I don't want Monica to be hurt or known by it. And Lucy Ann's like, screw all that. Yeah, I got you. I'll do whatever I can. But what they decide is let's put our name. We can't go to reporters. Nobody's going to give us a book deal, but let's take these tapes and let's take this story and what I have to say to Paula Jones's team because they're already in a testimony. They're already in a court battle with it. If we can slide in with them and just get a subpoena for you, Linda, we can then get the story out there. So Lucy Ann pulls some strings and gets Linda's subpoena. And a subpoena, I've never seen someone open up a door, say you were served, and feel so happy. But there we are. But in that, President Clinton is sitting in his office, and one of his chiefs, played by Christopher McDonald, comes in and says, "Hey," I think it's Robert, I can't remember his last name, comes in and says, "Hey, real quick, the new list of names for the Paula Jones case has come in for witnesses, and all these names look familiar. Blah blah blah. So and so, so and so, so and so. We've seen all these names before. Not a big deal. But there is one new name on here that I think you might. I don't know. I don't know them. I know they were intern here, but I don't know them. Monica Lewinsky." And Clive Owen says it goes completely white. He doesn't, but he's stone cold to Bob. But you can tell there's so much happening on his face and underneath and in that brain. And Bob asked him, like, "Is there something I should be worried about?" And he's like, you know how fucking I am? Are you kidding me? No, I got this. Like, don't disrespect me like that. And he sends him out. We all know that the issue's about to hit the fan. And so he takes this like slow walk down the hallway of seeing like past presidents, get the Kennedy. She's just walking down the corridor, some sort of fogged off, sort of showing the haze that he's entered because he is making the way to the bedroom that he and Hillary share, and he just opens the door, leaves the light shine on her face, probably to try to wake her up without him actually waking her up, and then he just takes his suit jacket off, sits down, loosens his tie a little bit, and just stares at Hillary, who we really haven't seen Edie Falco as Hillary yet. We've seen her in the background, but this seems like the next episode is when we're going to get the full-on Edie Rath as Hillary, because it's clear that he's walking to that room because he has to let her know what's happened, because this is all about to come out. Every piece of it's about to be revealed. And so all the placating that he was doing for Monica didn't work, even though Monica is not the one who was actually throwing him under the bus. Linda is. So it's fascinating to see how all of that works, and also very disgusting. The term gaslighting sometimes gets overused, but this is definitely what was happening to Monica, and poor thing, while making a lot of silly, just young person decisions with her life, clearly had a bad thing with men. And have chosen some men that were just unattainable, or at least for long terms, but that could easily dismiss her. And she's starting to feel the wrath of that being just easily dismissed. And seeing her break down and cry was heartbreaking. And just the Vernon Jones of it all is what was one of the scenes in this one that just really was unnerving. Because like I said, he came off very cordial until he's like, you put your hands on her. And they all just treating her like a property that they're sort of passing around. All in all, a really good episode. A bit of a slow burn compared to the previous ones, because we're dealing with one specific point of time with just the tapes. We don't have the cold opens that we've been having for the last few episodes where we're introducing a new character. A lot of the new characters are just introduced throughout. But it's still a really, really powerful episode, and we're starting to get into the muck of it all. These next few episodes, we see the descent and the walls sort of closing in on Clive Owen. I think Clive Owen's about to show his ass and show why he's one of the best to do it. And an almost completely unrecognizable version of President Clinton. I think it's about to get really heated here when he has to tell Edie, Miss Hillary Clinton, about this affair. Everyone for these next few episodes is going to be on a high. This is a setup piece for all the things that are about to occur in the future, and I'm ready for it. But that is episode 4 of Impeachment, American Crime Story, called The Telephone Hour. What did you guys think about this episode? Leave your thoughts and comments in the comments below. If you haven't already, you can follow us on Twitter at HollywoodADI. You can hit us up on email at HollywoodAlreadyDidIt@gmail.com. We also have a podcast with the same name that's on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, any other place podcast. We're there, and we're also here on YouTube. But like always, I got my ticket. You got yours.